We were talking about the makif harochik of Yechida, that in addition to the level of makif hakarev, which is the level of chaya, which is after the koiches pnimim of nefesh roch neshama, there's makif harochik, which is Yechida, and that has to do with rotzen and tainug, which is essentially higher than the connection with the koiches, not like chokhmah, which is like a rashis of all the koiches. It relates to the rest of the koiches. That's why it's called makif hakarev. But makif harochik of Yechida is something that's beyond the koiches. So now Noi Zayin is going to speak about that even though the level of Ratzin, the level of Makif HaRochik Yechida is higher than the Koiches, it still interacts or is nimshach into the Koiches. Oi Zayin, bottom of the page. Amram, after Bechinas HaRatzin L'mayla Gamra Koiches, though the level of will is completely beyond the Koiches, Mikal Makim still and all, Hareihu Meir V'nimshach B'chol HaKoiches V'evari HaGuf. It shines, it's drawn down into all the powers and all the limbs of the body. And because of this, there is power and weakness in the will. In other words, the fact that there is changes in will. Sometimes the will is in a powerful state, sometimes the will is in a weakened state. That's because of its relationship to the koiches of the body. And along with the idea that it comes into the different koiches, it shines into the lower koiches. It says on top of page Vav, he's still higher than the rest of the koiches of the body. The reason for that is even the way it shines and it's drawn down in all the powers, it remains in its own existence, which is makif. It retains its makif state, its transcendent state. It's beyond all the mitzvahs, beyond the koiches and the entire mitzvahs. That is the nature of makif harochik, the distant makif. He says in the second paragraph, the similar vein is the way the mitzvahs are, the way they relate to the person, the way it's internalized, and so on. One thing is Shem Bechinas Ratzon Elyon. The first thing about a mitzvah, it's Hashem's will. It's known Shebachol mitzvah yesh segula pratis v'kavana pratis shayeches lemitzvah zudavke. Every mitzvah has its unique intention, its unique purpose, its unique thing that it accomplishes. That's specific to this mitzvah. Tefillin has something unique and specific that Shabbos doesn't have. Kashrus has something unique and specific that Shatnez doesn't have, etc., etc. Every mitzvah has its own unique purpose and intention. V'yeshnoi, and in addition to this, there is Bechinas Haratzon shebemitzvah. There is Hashem's will that's in the mitzvah. Shehu b'shaveh b'chol mitzvahs. That's equal in all the mitzvahs. Kalas kachamuras. The mitzvahs that are the most lenient, if you will, or not lenient, or lightest of mitzvahs, and the most severe and stringent of mitzvahs share this common denominator. They are all considered Hashem's will. They are all what Hashem wanted. Now, the rotzin zeh shulamayla mischalkus, this will of Hashem that's beyond division, that's a common denominator in all the mitzvahs. We need to draw it down in every specific individual mitzvah. That in addition to being aware of the specific nature of that mitzvah or the specific intention of that mitzvah, it needs to be felt that I'm the general will. This is Hashem's desire of me. This is what Hashem wants me to do. I'm following Hashem's will and directive. He says, the idea behind this is, like it's explained in Teres Rosh of the Mitler Rebbe, knowing the individual specific intention that makes one mitzvah unique and different from another mitzvah, that does not hold back the performance of the mitzvah. So in other words, though it's ideal if when I fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin, I have the specific kavanas have to do with tefillin, and when I fulfill the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, I have that, the kavanas and the intention of what Kriya Shema has to do. But if I don't, if I just do it because it's a mitzvah, so then I fulfill the obligation and I've done the mitzvah. But the general intention in every mitzvah, to know that this is a command of Hashem. And for this reason, he fulfills the mitzvah because this is Hashem's command. This is something that is like basic, and if a person doesn't have it, then it's like preventing the actual fulfillment of the mitzvah, meaning that, as we know, that if a person doesn't have in mind to do a mitzvah, he was like passing by a shul and the shofar was blowing, and he didn't and he heard it, but he wasn't intending to be yotzeh. So there was no intention of fulfilling Hashem's will. Or a person that was tekei al Islamid, blowing shofar to train himself, to practice shofar, without any intention of fulfilling a mitzvah. So then the mitzvah wasn't fulfilled, because you need to know, you need to have in mind that idea that this rotzen kloli, that you're doing it because it's Hashem's will. This idea of the common denominator of all the mitzvahs is that it's Hashem's will. So this is the idea, line 16. Mashakol ha-mitzvahs sarach l'kaimim tzad kabbalas oil. Why all mitzvahs have to be fulfilled out of an accepting of the yoke of heaven. Ukinvor b'Tanya, like it's explained in Tanya, the famous Perek Mem Aleph, the beginning of Perek Mem Aleph. Shareishes ha'avodah v'ikar v'sharsho inyan kabbalas oil. At the beginning of the avodah, and the principal part of avodah, and the root of avodah is the idea of accepting the yoke of heaven, meaning recognizing that Hashem is king and we have to fulfill the mitzvahs because he commanded us. Now, in this level of Ratzon, there is the Ratzon, the way it's in the lower level, the Kabbalah's oil, the way it's in the lower level, and then there's a level that transcends intellect. Ella, this type of Shoyrish Avodah, this type of basic beginning point of Avodah, this is an acceptance of the yoke of heaven that's below intellect. He hasn't yet necessarily explored anything. He hasn't yet understood yet anything about Hashem. He just does it on a basic level of fulfilling Hashem's mitzvah. But its root is mechinas haratzon shalamayla gam naseichel. It's from the ratzon that's completely beyond the level of intellect. This is also what we found. When it comes to a time of decree against Yiddishkeit, that the Goyim want to eradicate Judaism, so then even when it comes to something that's called a red shoelace, wearing a shoelace in a certain manner, that the Goyim had one way of doing it and Yidden have a different way of doing it. So then the very fact, the reason why the Goyim are trying to get a Yid to do so, it's because they're trying to uproot Yiddishkeit. So then even on something so minor, that's not even a mitzvah min HaTorah, it's not even a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, a Yid is obligated to give up his life for it. Meaning, just like as if he'd be being threatened with his life to bow down to Avodah Zarah. How come? How can such a minor activity and something like Avodah Zarah be on the same level? Because the general Ratzon that's in all mitzvahs equally, including this idea of not following what the Goyim are trying to tear him away from Yiddishkeit. Amnam inyan zeh b'chinas haratzon k'fi shenimshach b'pnimis b'chol mitzvah pratis. All of this that we just now spoke about is the way the will of Hashem is equal and comes in every single mitzvah, whether it's not dressing like a goy or whether it's not bowing down to Avodah Zarah. This is the Ratzon Klali that's in all mitzvahs equally. So it's the Ratzon which is beyond details, but it comes down into details. In addition to the Ratzon that comes down into details, just like we said before that the will comes down into the different koiches nefesh, there's the level of the will that transcends all the details. And higher than this is the level of the will, the way it's on its own, beyond coming into the details. The source of the will that comes into the details. So now we're going to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the Maimer. At the beginning of the Maimer, we had the question about Chukas HaPesach versus Chukas HaPara, which is greater. Both of them are called Chukah. Chukah is a very powerful type of mitzvah. It shows on something that's beyond reason. And we want to know, they seem the same, and which one is greater. So first of all, why they seem the same, we want to know, and what's the idea that you need to know who is greater, and so on. So he says in Ois Ches, line 5, according to this, we could explain the difference between the two statutes, the Chukah, the decree of the Pesach, and the decree of the Parah. When it comes to the Parah Aduma, it doesn't say Zois Chukas HaPara. When it comes to Korban Pesach, it says Zois Chukas HaPesach. So it's specific, the decree of the Korban Pesach. It's not about the general idea of Torah. Whereas Zois Chukas when it comes to the Parah Aduma, it says Zois Chukas HaTorah. It's beyond just the Parah Aduma. It's the Chuk of the entire Torah. So it says in line 7, that the decree of the Pesach in such a way that the law comes down in a specific detail, in a measured way, it has a boundary in a very organized fashion. Though the idea of Pesach is the idea of skipping over and jumping over. That's the meaning of the word Pesach, that Hashem jumped over the houses, and the same thing, the avodah of Pesach is jumping beyond and breaking out of boundaries. It still all comes down, this out of boundaries level, into being measured in a specific manner. It's the way the will comes down in a specific mitzvah. As opposed to the Parah Aduma, it says, this is the statute of the Torah. How come? Because it's a general idea that's beyond measure and boundary. When it comes to Parah Aduma, that's like the will, the way it's on its own, beyond the details. That's why it's called Zois Chukas HaTorah. When it says Parah, that's the decree of the Torah without specifics. It's not the decree of the Parah. It's beyond the Korban Pesach. That's the Chuk of the Pesach, because by Zois Chukas HaPesach, it's both of them are Ratzon. It's about the level that's beyond reason, but the Pesach is about the Ratzon, the way it comes down to the details, and Parah Aduma is the pure Ratzon that's beyond the level of details. So now, based on this, we can understand the idea that the Medrash questioned about seemingly they're the same. So he says in line 19, Medrash, still in all the Medrash says that Chukas HaPara and Chukas HaPesach are similar to each other. How come? Why are they similar if one is about the details and one is beyond the details? because of the level, from the perspective of the level of the will, that's drawn down and is sensed and is felt in the details. And also from the perspective of the delight of the mitzvahs. That, as we know, that Hashem says, Nachas ruach lefonai shamarti v'nasar etzoini. The pleasure that came before me, the nachas that came before me, that I said, and my will was fulfilled. Like we said before, that there's two levels in Yechida, the Makif HaRochik. There's the level of will, and then there's even higher than that, the delight. So you have, in the mitzvahs, you have the will of Hashem. True, it's the will of Hashem the way it comes down to the details, but it's still Hashem's will. And also, there's the pleasure, there's the delight that Hashem derives in and from the mitzvahs. So in that regard, when we look at Pesach and Para Aduma, both of them have the rotzen, have the will that comes down to the details. And both of them have the idea of the delight that the Korban Pesach and the Para Aduma affect by Hashem. Not only that, like the Chazal begin, I do not even know which is greater than which. This means that the chuk of the Pesach is greater. Why would we say the chuk of the Pesach is greater? We said that's the will that comes down into the details. The kivan shah, since what's primary is action. The neshama did not descend down here below for its own sake, to fix itself up. But rather to repair, beautify the body, the animal soul, and his portion of the world, like it's explained in Tanya. That's actually the Shiurim in Tanya, this the beginning Perek Lamed Vav and Perek Lamed Zayin, that it says that's our purpose. That the whole purpose is about transforming the world, transforming the body, transforming Nafsha Bahamis. Where do you have action? If you're talking about a huge will that's beyond the level of action. The level of action has to do with the details. Top of page Zayin, Shezel Davkai De'am Maisem Shabom B'Didavak Bol. This is only through action that comes in a way that's measured and a way that's a boundary. So therefore, one might say that Chukas HaPesach, which is about the details, or it's about the world, and it's about the will coming down into limitations. From this perspective, one would say that the Chukas HaPesach is greater than the Para, because the Chukas HaPesach is about the will, the way it comes down to the details, which is the whole purpose of creation. Still, in all, the conclusion of the Chazal is who is actually greater, Hapara. The Para Aduma is greater than Pesach. The explanation is because the ones that will consume the Korban Pesach cannot do so without the Para Aduma. The Para Aduma can exist outside of the Korban Pesach, but the Korban Pesach cannot be there without the Para Aduma. How come? Why is the Korban Pesach dependent on the Para Aduma? The law of the Para is idea that's beyond measure and boundary totally. That's the idea of the avoid of tshuva. It's beyond the avoid of tzadikim. That's the idea that the ones who eat the Korban Pesach need the Para Aduma for the sake of Tara. In other words, like this. Para Aduma comes to purify a person from coming in contact with a dead body. The idea of death is associated with Avedis. The idea of death came as a result of Avedis. Chetes Hadas brought down the idea of death. Para Aduma is the antithesis to death, the opposite of that. It's the idea of the Baal Tshuva. Korban Pesach, on the other hand, is is the idea Yetzias Mitzrayim. We went out of Mitzrayim. It's something that came from above. It's a level of tzaddik. It's not about countering negative. We were like children that were newly born, and we have nothing bad on our record. We're tzaddikim. So the ones that are eating the carbon Pesach, which is symbolic of the level of tzaddikim, do not have the maila of Baal Tshuva, because Baal Tshuva completely break out of all barriers and limitations, whereas tzaddikim, their lives are in a limited form, limited in the ritzonis having to do with Torah mitzvahs. Only because of a ratzon that's beyond the details, the will that comes beyond the details, can there be that even a person that transgressed, even a person that messed up in the details, he can still come back. Because if the will was only implanted in the details, so if you got the details right, you did the avodah tzaddikim, you're with the program. You didn't get the details right, no connection. Comes the para aduma, the ratzon that's beyond the details, and says, yes, I messed up, but still in all, I can transcend the details and draw down that will beyond the details to repair that. So that's the same idea that the people that eat the carbon Pesach need to have the para aduma. It says further in line 9, the second paragraph on the page, we can add an explanation of why one would think initially that the carbon Pesach is higher than the para aduma. Like we spoke about many times, the Rebbe says, even when you have a possible idea which is afterwards refuted in the Torah, the fact that Torah says it also has validity to it. And when a person is learning even the part of the Gemara or whatever that's only speaking about a possible idea, even though it's rejected later on, a person still needs to make a brichsa Torah beforehand. He's not allowed to learn it without making the bracha about Torah study. So he says, what is the possibility that Pesach is higher than the para aduma? There's a special advantage of the avoid of tzaddikim. Chazal say, that when Hashem consulted the neshamas prior to the creation of the world, He consulted the neshamas of tzaddikim. Why doesn't He just say He consulted the neshamas? So the Rebbe says, like it's explained in a different place, the exact language over here is that He consulted neshamas of tzaddikim. He did not consult Baal Tshuva. How come? Because what was the purpose of creation? The purpose of creation, when Hashem set the world into motion, when He, beginning from His first thought about the world, His intention was doing the mitzvahs in actuality. That's only by a tzaddik. He did not sin, he did not cause a blemish, he did not cross the path of Torah mitzvahs. So, in other words, this was plan A, and this is in Hashem's consultation for the creation of the world. It was plan A, tzaddikim. Still, that's why we would think that the carbon Pesach, which is symbolic of tzaddikim, is higher than the Chukot Apara. Still in all, the conclusion is that the para aduma is higher than the Pesach, because those that consume the carbon Pesach need it, because even tzaddikim need tshuva. This is also tzaddikim need to have the avodah of tshuva mitzad cheta egel, because the sin of the golden calf. It says that whenever I will bring punishment upon the Jewish people for whatever wrong they did in that particular time, I will also remember and add to it a little bit of the punishment for the Cheta Egel, because he didn't want to punish them all at once for the severe sin of the Cheta Egel. And to such degree that we see that tzaddikim need the idea of tshuva, Mashiach also latzav tzaddikai b'tiyuf, the Mashiach is going to come to bring tzaddikim to do tshuva. So we see even tzaddikim need tshuva. Even the Pesach needs the para aduma. Therefore, Dafka Mashiach will redeem the Yidden Shari Kvar Kol Kitzim, because all projected ends that Chazal say already concluded. And the matter is only dependent upon tshuva. So we see again, even tzaddikim need to bring to the level of tshuva, so we should be able to have Mashiach. And the Torah promised that eventually Yidden will do tshuva and immediately they'll become redeemed. So again, here's the importance of para, which is the idea of tshuva. Nissen Nigalu and Nissen Asin Ligo, and Nissen they were redeemed in the past from Yitzias Mitzrayim. And the Nissen they will be redeemed in the future with the coming of Mashiach, with Bias Mashiach Tzedkeinu B'Karav Mamish.